Today I wanna talk about the healing problem and why healing for the Alliance is absolute easy mode, and while I'm at it, how about we make it a convenient tier list so you apes are gonna keep watching the video. Medina, make a healer tier list? Well, here it is, I say. Very well, disregard this icon of the monk, I didn't wanna get rid of it. First we gotta talk about the Paladin and why Medina is so freaking upset at it. Well, before I gotta tell you any spoilers, the Paladin is uncontested S tier. Now there are several reasons for it. First of all, it is Molten core, and in Molten core you need fire resistance, so in Onyxia to an extent it helps. And that means you gotta get at least 4 paladins for your raid, because if you don't, your resistance aura is not gonna be there and you are gonna die. So any sort of paladin is gonna be very high tier. Even a retribution paladin which is doing crap damage is still very desirable just for the aura. Not to mention that stacking paladins has an advantage that stacking shamans doesn't have, and that is blessings. You can put every single blessing on somebody if you got 4 paladins, and that is a lot of stats. So yes, I would say that Horde has the easiest tanking experience, and at the same time, the Alliance has by far the easiest healing experience. Actually, I got numbers to prove it. Look at this. As you can see, the Holy Paladin is easily 30 or even 40% ahead of the Priest, which is the second at the time. Now, it is even worse than that, because that's the healing total. Take a look at tank healing. Look at this perfect ladder that forms up. As you can see, how are we supposed to compete in the Horde when the Paladin is doing almost double what the next best thing for the Horde is doing, which is the Shaman? Now, the reason that the Paladin is so busted is because of this new rune right here, Divine Light. You can keep healing somebody. Remember guys, when you crit as a paladin, your spell refunded, so mana has never been an issue to paladins. As long as you get enough intellect and crit, you're never gonna run out of mana, especially now with Shadow Priest, because they are gonna generate mana passively for them, so they can go on forever. The only limitation to them was managing their heals poorly, but with this new rune in here, every time they heal, this is a big heal, and any excess healing is turned into a shield, so there is no overhealing for them anymore. That is not a concern anymore. As you can see, it benefits from every effect that benefits Holy Light, and that means that this whole thing is gonna get refunded if they crit. Of course, they also have a lot of other broken runes, but that rune in particular is absolutely disgusting. Not only because it is extremely efficient, not only because it doesn't have such a thing as overhealing, but at the same time they are gonna snipe the healers of other people. It's not even that they snipe the heal, they snipe the damage before it happens, which is absolute cancer. So paladins get me really upset, but goddamn they are some really good healers. Next is gonna be the Restoration Shaman. Now the Restoration Shaman had a whole identity shift in this phase. They went from being an AoE healing to being like a tank healing, very similar to the Restoration Druid actually in its identity. They are more of a tank healer that can throw some big cooldowns for the raid, but it's still like only a tank healer. Healing Rain is essentially Wild Growth. I mean, they didn't have a lot of good ideas to put on the Resto Shaman sadly, but their numbers are pretty freaking decent. They do not have mana problems, they provide totems for the raid. Of course you need totems for resistance, so of course they are going to be mandatory, at least 4 shamans in the raid too. In the case of the shaman it's a little hard, because everybody and their mom wants to play an enhancement shaman right now because of that sweet sulfuras. So you are not gonna be in a shortage of shamans usually, which is something that happens with the paladin, that most paladins like healing or are healers. I don't know, maybe they are masochists, maybe they just hate their life, I don't know their minds, but most shamans currently want to be enhancement, so that makes, relatively speaking, there is a lot less value for a Resto Shaman over a Holy Paladin. But still, you cannot go wrong with a Resto Shaman, they are absolutely good. And Mana Tide is not half bad, okay? Mana Tide Totem is not that bad. It's pretty good actually. So yeah, we're gonna drop the Mones, but way behind the Paladin, okay? The Paladin is a whole league of its own. There you go, I made a tier just so he can sit comfortably right there, because he's the owner of the game right now, so I guess they deserve their own tier. I made it pink, you know? Just to shine a light on their identity and stuff. Next up is going to be the Holy Priest. Now, people have a hard time telling the Holy Priest and the Discipline Priest apart. It's like Chinese people of healing or something, but it's actually pretty easy. You see, currently the Holy Priest is the AoE healer and the Discipline Priest is the tank healer. It makes sense, they got the shields and stuff, so of course they are gonna add up very well to that. Of course, Discipline has the PI, so even though their output is always gonna be a little lower, Power Infusion is such a crucial ability to boost the DPS of somebody that a lot of people wanna use this thing. Throwing PI on somebody is a big deal. That's 20% spell damage. Of course, they could throw the PI at themselves if you wanna really cheese the parses, but that's a little scummy. That's not what you're supposed to do. On the other hand, Holy has all the good efficiency, all the good mana talents. Holy is what usually you associate with like the vanilla healer. As you can see right here, Discipline with Soul Warding, it doesn't have a cooldown anymore, which is really cancerous. So they can basically spam shields all the time. And that's a big shield. So what happens in fights where there's fire damage going on, the tank obviously has fire resistance, we're talking something like Ragnaros. The Discipline Priest is the same function, they are gonna keep the tank shielded for most of the fight. Yes, the shield is gonna run out at some point because forbearance, but the shield is now so freaking big that Ragnaros usually doesn't do enough damage to get through it in one single hit anymore, which at the same time gives it like another secret value in the sense that in theory, this could prevent a one-shot, and that's why you see that the Discipline Priest is beating the Holy Priest in tank healing. It's very hard to heal better than somebody that can heal damage before the damage goes through once again. Sadly, both priests are pretty bad at tank healing anyway, but AoE healing overall is still a very good thing for the Holy Priest. The Holy Priest is still excelling at it, and the new binding heal is actually pretty cool too, because in fights like Ragnaros where there is constant AoE damage going through, being able to heal yourself and somebody else is actually really useful. So for that reason I am gonna call the Holy Priest pretty decent, and I will call the Discipline Priest crap. I'm sorry, it's just a gimmick, it doesn't work. Next is gonna be the Restoration Druid. Now the Restoration Druid is a bit of an all-rounder, and while they are intended to be more of a tank healer this phase, they are really good at doing both things. They still have Wild Growth, they still have Tranquility, and their new rune gives them a lot more healing. So Wild Growth got nerfed the previous phase, and then the tree form gives you 60% more. That was an attempt to nerf the Boomkin form, but if you're a tree, that is overall like 20% more healing that you can do with Wild Growth now, so it is even stupider. That was already one of the stupidest heals that ever hit this game. You can heal your entire party for a gazillion, and it is instant. Druids also have 25% extra spirit now, which means they are gonna get a lot more mana regeneration. And all their heal over time spells cost 20% less, so Wild Growth is cheaper and Life Bloom is cheaper, and that's very important. Now the best way I can explain what the druid should do, what the druid is supposed to be doing, is that the druid is a baseline tank healer and a raid healer at the same time. You're supposed to roll HOTS on the tank while healing the raid. And it is kind of the only person that can do that, and it is very important to have HOTS on the tank because that stabilizes the healing during spikes. Of course, in a super organized guild that is not a problem, but in a normal guild, when the tank gets a random parry or something and he gets a lot of damage very quickly, sometimes the healers do not have time to react. And being able to have a lot of HOTS rolling on the tank constantly is gonna mean that you may save a healer cooldown to save the tank. Of course, the druid is extremely mana efficient. Also, their AoE output is out of this world. Even though it has a cooldown so it cannot go through constantly, it will still be very important because when there is a lot of damage going through at the same time, they are the best for that. When the ads in Ragnaros spawn, they can drop a Wild Growth and Tranquility and help the whole raid survive it. And once again, this is not gonna show in the meters because they only have a cooldown for it. Meanwhile, the Shaman or the Holy Priest can spam heals all the time. But the druid is there for you when it matters. And that's more than I can say about my family. So this boy is going on A tier. Not the greatest, but very good and very in demand, and everybody is gonna be happy to have one in the raid. Finally, we got the Arcane Mage. Now, I do not like the Arcane Mage. They just slapped healing on this spec instead of fixing the spec. So we Arcane people, Arcane fanboys that like DPSing, we are not gonna get to DPS with Arcane anymore. We're supposed to heal, and the heals are very unreliable and crap. Now granted, there was a lot of progress done to the mage. They tried to fix a lot of stupid stuff that went with it. You do not have to do a damage to heal anymore necessarily. You now have normal heals on your belt. They even increased the spell damage scaling to your heals, because that way you can get spell power instead of healing power, and that did help their DPS, but they are not supposed to DPS, I guess. If you wanna make them healers, they gotta heal, and their output is not good anymore. Their AoE is very lackluster to speak of. They are only good at tank healing, and even then they are not very great at it. Also, just a little side note, I guess, mage healers absolutely suck at the game. I wish this wasn't the case. If every mage healer was actually good, this would look a lot better, but it is a very clunky class. It is very difficult to effectively heal with a class that is not supposed to heal, and it shows in the numbers. They are at the bottom of every freaking chart, and even though they increase the ratios of their scaling, they still do not scale well. That's the cost you gotta pay for having to get spell damage instead of healing power. So overall, I think the Arcane Mage needs a huge buff, or even better, get deleted from the game. If you could delete these guys from the game, so every time I wipe in a dungeon or die in a dungeon, I cannot wipe because the guy doesn't have a red scroll, that would be great. If you can get rid of these guys, delete them off the game, I don't know, ship them to Siberia or something, that would be amazing. I would be so happy, but they are absolute crap, sadly. I would say I am a little surprised. I was expecting the Discipline Priest to be way stronger than it is, but such is life. Subscribe, join the Discord, and thank you for watching.